Dexterity is a complicated stat, so today I took all of that complex stuff and put it into a simple, easy to understand video with timestamps so you can go to your favorite weapons and see exactly how it changes combos and moves. This way you know exactly what stats to run on your favorite characters. But first, you should probably learn how Dex works in the first place. Every move in the game has recovery time, most of them anyways. Recovery time varies depending on whether you miss or hit, with hits usually having less recovery time. This recovery time is a combination of two recovery types, fixed and variable. Fixed recovery is, well, fixed. It doesn't change based on dex. However, variable recovery, or as the game calls it, just recovery, is what is affected by dex. You can find the recovery time for every move in the power viewer and training mode. Anyways, the higher your dex is, the lower your variable recovery will be. But Brawlhalla, like most fighting games, works in whole frames. So for example, a move can't be 13.5 frames, it has to be either 13 or 14. Brawlhalla will always round down. So if you have 13.1 frames, it'll be 13 frames, and if you have 12.9, it'll just be 12. This is why the info I share in this video will be important to you, because a certain amount of dexterity could be just enough to give you one less frame on a move, resulting in a new combo. So now I'll be going in order of every weapon and important dex amounts for these weapons, so you know if you should be running dex stance or not on your favorite legends. Oh, and by the way, the spreadsheet I use in this video is made by me and it's linked in the description if you want to take a look for yourself. First of all, let's start with hammer. 4 dex is actually pretty important for hammer, since you get one less frame on end light, side light, nair, and stare on hit. This doesn't unlock any new combos or of sorts, but having one less frame on 4 moves is pretty significant on hit, and you also save 4 frames on miss on 4 different moves. 4 dex is pretty important. You want to have it, especially for a character like Nash, which I'll discuss later. You want 4 dex for spear as well. Now we go into 6 dex, which has some really cool new stuff. To start, end light and D light, or end light and side light, will be true on white health. This is only unlocked during this dex. Stare into D light will become unjumpable on low health or white health. Nair and side light get a frame off of them just for general use. It doesn't really get a new combo. However, dare and recovery are faster, so you can have an easier time hitting those Russian mafias, and also you save a total of 6 frames on miss on 6 different moves. So I would say if you have a character with 5 dex, you want to get the dex stance, and if you have a character with 6 dex, you don't want to take away dex, you actually want to keep it. Now we get to 9 dex, and as of the making of this video, the only character that can get this with hammer is Cassidy. And here's some insane stuff about 9 dex hammer. Side light into D light is true, and stare into end light is true on low health. So Cassidy actually gets a 4-piece true combo on low white health. That is side light, D light, side light, end light. That is all true, and it does a lot of damage. It's really insane. And also you save 3 frames on miss, which is nice. So if you are a Cassidy main, you might want to consider running this. However, I'll get into this later, blasters aren't really affected that much by dex, so I wouldn't really recommend it. And just as a final iteration to really put this out there, don't do 2 dex on hammer. Just don't do it. You lose so many frames and it feels so sluggishly slow. It's not worth it. Next up, we have sword. Now the thing is, dexterity has a good effect on sword, but as far as I can tell, you don't really unlock any new true combos, or you get any combos that become unjumpable. So even though dexterity does affect it a good amount on a lot of moves actually, you really don't need to be concerned with dex when you're playing sword. However, a general rule is that you want to aim for 4. Blasters are the first weapons so far that are barely affected by dex. You really don't need to worry about it at all. However, here's a little fun fact, running 6 dex on blasters will save you 6 frames on 6 different moves, on miss that is, which is nice. You really don't need to be concerned about dex when you're playing blasters. Now we have lance, and I'm a filthy lance player, so this stuff is kind of important to me, or you if you play lance. 6 dexterity is important. You get less recovery time on nair. That move is already a little bit difficult to follow up, so this helps. And also you get D light into end light faster. You just get D light faster, but that's kind of the most common combo, which is really important. And also you get 7 frames saved on miss on 7 different moves, which is really nice. So you want to be running 6 dex for lance. It is a bit important. However, it's not like you're nothing without it, but it is a really good noticeable effect. The next one is pretty well known, about 9 dex lengths, and that is D-Light and Light is True. The only character that can get this as of the making of this video is Lord Vax. This is a pretty disgusting combo. It's true and does like 35 damage, and D-Light is relatively easy to hit. It's insanely strong. And also you can do the Lance Vortex faster, which if you don't know what the Lance Vortex is, it's the whole Sair there, Sair there, Sair into death. It's like the 0 to death of Lance. And Sair and Dare become faster on 9 dex, so if you are going for those type of plays, this is kind of important. And you do save 3 frames on miss, which really isn't much, but it's something. Now we have Spear. With Spear, you really do want to have 3 dex, at least 4 dex preferably, just because you're gonna notice it when you're missing on Spear. It has a really strong effect on 3 and 4 dex, so try to get 4 dex on Spear at least. The next important number is 6 dex, which is pretty important for Spear. You have Sair into Enlight True on low health. This is already a really good reason to run it on Spear, just because that combo is so good for just setting up, and you can follow up off of Enlight 2, and it does good damage. It's generally good to have 6 dex just for this reason. But also, you get a frame off of Enlight, Dare, Recovery, and Ground Pound on hit. And it's just insane because you save so much with 6 dex, so I would highly recommend it. And you save 6 frames on miss, which is really nice. Now we have Katars, which are actually fairly affected by dex. Here are the most important things you need to know. On 4 dex, Enlight and Recovery become faster. Enlight is the important one here since it's a setup move, and having less frames on setup moves is obviously great. And also you save 4 frames on miss, which is it's not that much, but it's decent. On 6 dex Katars, you get Granted Dare faster, which is huge. It's another setup move that you can follow up off of, and just having 1 less frame on it is going to be so good for those Katar strings that you go for. And also if you save 4 frames on miss. But I would say 6 dex is important for the most part if you can get it. And the last important one here is 7 dex, where you get Enlight and D-Light faster, which I think is huge for the weapon. So if you are able to get 7 dex, I would highly recommend it. Don't miss out on this on Katars. You also save 4 frames on miss, which is not a lot, but you know, I would say having a frame off of 2 setup moves is way too big to ignore. Now we have Axe. You might have seen a couple of pro players running 4 dex on Teros or Ulgrim, and I think that's primarily because if you hit the aerial version of Dare on the ground, it's gonna be really easy to follow up with D-Light. It's not quite true, but it is really fast. And also you get Sair and Enlight faster on a hit. It's not that important since you can't really follow up off of Sair and Enlight, but it's nice. And also you save 5 frames on miss. On 6 dex, you get Nair faster, and you also get Sair, Aerial Dare, and Ground Pound faster, and you save 5 frames on miss. I'd say it's kind of important to have this, but you don't really gain that much from it. But, you know, getting, I'd say like 4 frames on hit is pretty significant for just 1 dex switch. So you might want this if you play Axe. Now we have 9 dex, which as of the making of this video, the only character that can get it is Volkov. Aerial Dare into D-Light actually becomes true, which is huge. And also D-Light, Sair, and Ground Pound become faster, which is nice, but again, you can't really follow up off of any of those moves. And you also save 4 frames on miss, which is not bad, but the important thing here is that you get Aerial Dare into D-Light True, which is really good. Now we have Bow, which dex actually affects a good amount on miss, but not so much on hit. Here's what you need to know. The only thing that I think becomes important here is on 6 dex, you can hit D-Light into Ground Pound True off stage, which is nice, but you know, would you want to make the switch for 6 dex just for this and also 5 frames on miss? It's really up to you, but in my opinion, it's probably not worth it. Now we have Gauntlets. This one is very simple. Just trying to get 6 dex. On 6 dex, you get Enlight, Nair, Dare, Recovery, and Ground Pound faster, which is just huge. 5 frames on 5 different moves on hit is massive. So I would try to aim for 6 dex on Gauntlets. And also you get Nair into Enlight True, into GC Enlight True, which is nice for the weapon too. And 5 frames on miss, which is not bad. But I would say for those first 5 that I mentioned, saving a frame off of them is just massive, especially for Nair, Dare, Enlight. It just helps you follow up so much better. The weapon is just gonna feel smoother with 6 dex. Scythe doesn't have too much to it in terms of dex. However, you do want 4 dex because you get Nair and Dare and Ground Pound faster. Most notably Nair, because you have the Sair Nair combo, which becomes faster off of this. And also Dare is just a good move to have 1 less frame on, so that really is gonna help with setups. And also, you get 8 less frames on miss, which is huge. I think that's every move getting a frame knocked off on miss. So definitely don't go for 3 dex Scythe, it's not gonna feel good. The other important dex stance on Scythe is 7 dex, where you get Nair, Dare, and Recovery faster, which is huge to have a frame less on Nair. And also Dare and Recovery are nice too, but Nair is really the important one here. And Heavy Delight is faster, which, yeah, it's nice, but you're not gonna be following up off of Heavy Delight that often. And you save 3 frames on miss, which is really not that much, but it's something. Next up, we have Cannon, Orb, and Greatsword. Why do I pair these 3 together? Because the effect that Dex has on them is pretty much nothing. You don't need to worry about it with these weapons. It's generally not important. Again, I have the spreadsheet linked down below so you can see whatever effects that Dex have on them. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't affect these weapons at all. It affects them on miss, like most weapons, but getting frames off on hits is more important than miss, so you can kind of ignore Dex if you play any of these 3 weapons. And finally, the last weapon is boots. Now, there's 2 important ones that you should know, but there'll be a 3rd bonus that I'll throw in there. First of all, we have 5 Dex will save you a frame off of End Light, Side Light with no input, so the Garnet Side Light, the Dare with input, so the one that you land with, which is actually pretty huge if you want to follow up off of it. And also Recovery, which, is not that much, but you know, it's something. And Grampon too, which, again, is not that important. But the real important dex value for boots is 6. Now, if you look at the chart here, 6 only saves you a frame on Sair and Recovery. So why is it so important? Because it saves you a frame on the Sair with input, the one you use to follow up. Getting 1 less frame on this is so huge as someone that plays boots a lot, because you can do Sair into End Light, Sair into D-Light faster, Sair into End Light being a much more consistent combo, and just like Sair into Nair if you're in the air. It's so nice, and it's very noticeable if you play the weapon, getting 1 less frame on 6 dex. Which is also why you want 4 dex on boots, just because that's when you gain a frame, so don't go below 4 dex on boots. And as a little bonus, a 9 dex boots character would go crazy, even though there's none in the game right now. First of all, it would save you, again, a frame off of End Light, Side Light with no input, Nair, Dare with an input, and Recovery, which is all insane. But the real kicker is that you get Sair into End Light True, which would be insane. If there's ever a 9 dex boots character, it would go crazy. And I think that's pretty much it for the video. You can check out the chart below to see the effects on unarmed. However, I didn't really bother testing it just because it's unarmed. However, dex does actually have a good amount of change on unarmed. So if you discover something new, feel free to play around with it, because you can see on the spreadsheet when every move loses a frame. If you want a simplified version of the spreadsheet, you can click on the totals thing on the bottom, and it'll just show you, okay, I'm running 5 dex on hammer, it's saving me 1 frame on hit and 5 frames on miss and 6 frames in total. That's probably not worth it. Look at 6 dex. Oh, look, it's saving me 6 frames on hit and 6 on miss. So 12 in total, that's probably worth it. So you can scroll through and find pretty much every weapon except Greatsword, because it just doesn't affect Greatsword. So it'll be very dex you want for your weapon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this was in-depth enough for you while not being too complicated. Make sure to check out some of my other Brawlhalla videos, or the Twitch or Discord server if you want to. And I really appreciate you watching. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.